Hi there, welcome back for another DIY home improvement project tip. So today we're finishing up a flooring installation in this house, and I just got a small area here to do. This is actually an entry coming off of the front door. Most of this room is going to be carpet, but we want to have a small section here, probably about a 3 or 4 foot square section of laminate flooring where you actually enter the house. So I'm going to show you a very basic installation here. This is about as simple as it gets, but it kind of shows you the steps of the process. If you're thinking about doing a laminate project, this will give you a good baseline to start with, so you can see some of the tools that you need and kind of the process you go through for the installation. So let's take a look. So as I first take a look at this, the first thing to do is kind of lay out and figure out the area that we want to cover. So what I think I want to do is have the laminate come so that it basically comes just beyond the door trim there, and then as far as how deep it comes, I just want to make sure that we have adequate coverage so that when the door opens, that the door stays on the laminate and doesn't actually open onto the carpet. That way, if it's raining or something and people come in with wet feet, or if the door's wet, it's not dripping on the carpet, it stays on the laminate. So that kind of gives me some approximate area. This doesn't have to be real perfect measurements, so I just kind of have some general guidelines. I want to make sure, ideally, because I want to keep this a simple installation, I'm just going to lay it so that I use one board. I won't have to make I won't have to do any splicing of boards down the middle. It's kind of unusual for a laminate project because normally you're obviously covering a wider room, but as I said earlier, this is going to be a very basic installation, so we'll keep it simple. So it looks like one board is more than sufficient to get beyond the door trim like I talked about, so that's good. So I know I won't have to make additional cuts. The first step that we need to do, there was carpet in here previously, so we need to go ahead and get this carpet tack pulled up so that that's out of our way. Now that we've got the tack strips removed and the general area that we're going to be working, the next thing we want to do is make sure that our floor surface is nice and smooth. In this case, like I said, there was carpet in here, and there's areas where the carpet pad was stapled down to the floor. So we need to get these staples pulled out so we've got a nice flat, smooth substrate that the laminate flooring will actually lay on. You can do that a couple different ways. Probably the easiest way is actually just to use a pliers if there aren't too many. If you've got a large surface that you're going over, you'll want to use a floor scraper, which you can purchase, or you can actually rent floor scrapers as well. If it's just staples, you can actually go around with a hammer and just bang them down and bang them flat to the floor. But a lot of times, if carpet is coming out, you're going to have wads of carpet pad like that. And so you can't hammer those down. Those all have to be pulled up. So this can be kind of a tedious, time-consuming part of the process, but it's part of it. It's got to be done. So we'll get that knocked out now. Okay, now we've got the floor cleaned up. We've got the staples and any little bits of dried drywall mud or anything uneven picked up, and we've got that swept. The next step that we need to do in terms of preparation is we need to cut off the door casing, so the door trim. When you're installing your laminate, the laminate is actually just going to go up. It's going to butt up to or slightly away from your baseboard, so that's fine. But the best way to do the installation to have the most professional look is your door trim or your door casing. You actually want to have the laminate slide below that. So there's a couple different ways to do this. Probably the least expensive tool that you can buy is a jam saw, which looks like this. And this one, it swivels back and forth, so it's reversible depending on which side of the door that you're cutting on. And simply, what you want to do is take a piece of your flooring material. You want to butt it up to the piece of the door casing or jam that you're actually going to be cutting around, and then you basically just lay your saw flat, and then you just saw back and forth. Now you can see on this particular one here, we actually don't need to make any cuts. The floor, the casing is actually high enough that the floor is going to slide below that nicely. That one actually is set at the perfect height. But if you look at this side over here, you can see that on this side of the door, the flooring actually runs into the casing there. So again, you can take your jam saw. It's especially kind of challenging when you're in a corner like this. So rather than using a jam saw, I actually prefer to use an oscillating saw like this one. So this one just has a, this blade just vibrates back and forth very quickly, and it makes quick work of being able to cut, undercut the casing there. So we'll get right in and we'll be able to actually tuck that trim underneath there. And I'll kind of give you a demonstration now of how this works. So as you can see, that oscillating cutter makes quick work of that trim, as well as the door jamb over here that we want to get out of the way. Just kind of fish these chunks out of here, but now we've got enough room that we'll be able to actually slide our flooring material underneath that door jamb and the casing, and we'll be able to have a nice finished look. So as the next step, since this is just a simple installation, I'm going to have all these boards cut to the same length. I'm just going to estimate where I want to actually make this cut on this door. This is a carpet transition, carpet reducer that we'll be putting on this side. So this is, just kind of a matter of taste, or how wide you want this to come out. I don't want it to be too, excessively far away from the door. We're going to use a couple of 1/4-inch spacers. We're going to have a 1/4-inch gap on this side over here away from the wall, so we allow room for expansion. And a little short section of flooring like this, there isn't going to be much movement, but you still want to leave yourself a little bit of room next to the wall there, so use some spacers. So now I'm going to come over here and I'm just going to take a marker. And I'm going to say I want that to be about, we're going to say approximately there. I think that's probably a good place to have that cut. I'll give a nice finished look next to that door casing. So now we're going to take this to the saw or the cutter. And I know these are approximately 6 inches and I want to come about 3 feet. So I'm just going to cut 6 of these boards right off the bat. Okay, now that we've got our planks marked to the proper length, I'm going to show you a few different ways that you can actually cut this depending on the tools that you have. What I'm using here is a guillotine style laminate or vinyl floor cutter. This is actually my preferred method, but I know this is not something that your average homeowner is going to have. If you're going to do much in terms of vinyl or laminate flooring projects, this is a great tool to pick up. You stick it in, put it to the line, and chop it to length. Probably the next most common way to cut laminate is with a miter saw, such as this one. And this works well too. Just have to make sure that you remember that you want to use ear protection, eye protection, and ideally you should probably wear a face mask as well, because when you cut this laminate, it puts off very fine dust. But it does make a nice, clean, perfect cut. Another common way to cut laminate planks is with a table saw. In this case, we've got our mark. We need to make sure we give ourselves a line all the way across. So we're going to be freehanding this cut. So just take a basic framing square, a marker, make a cut. Again, eye protection, ear protection. As long as you follow the line, that provides a nice clean cut as well. And one last method that you can use to cut laminate is a jigsaw like this one. I'm not going to demonstrate because I actually broke my blade. This isn't probably the most efficient way to cut, when you're doing installations when you need to cut around objects, you're definitely going to need a jigsaw. But you can make cross cuts with this as well, so it's not the most efficient method. Okay, so now we're ready to go ahead and install our first plank. And in this installation for this little entry, this is really the only board that we're going to have to make any difficult cuts on. So the goal here is we want to have the board end up so that it's just a little ways away from this door. I will say a lot of times in a lot of installations, the door, the threshold of the door actually might stick up higher than the subfloor, so you can actually tuck the board underneath that threshold, and that actually provides the best finished look. In this case, the subfloor is up even or just a hair higher than the bottom of the threshold, so we won't be able to do that. So this board is just going to basically not butt up against the door, but it's going to leave I'll leave a small gap there, probably 1/8 of an inch, and then that can be caulked to fill in that gap. So our goal here is we need to leave a little gap, about a 1/4 inch gap away from the baseboard, but also then make a cut at this point so that the floor actually slides underneath our door casing here, and then the door jamb is cut away as well. So we want to have the board underneath the door jamb as well as the door casing, so that it has a nice clean finished look. But then out here on the baseboard, it's actually going to stick out just a little bit, about a 1/4 of an inch, and then that will have quarter round applied that will actually cover up that gap. So between the quarter round there and this tucked underneath the door trim, everything will look finished and we won't have any gaps. So I'm going to go ahead and mark where I need to make some cuts. So I know I need to cut right there on the edge of that baseboard. I'll make the same mark on this side. And then I'm just going to take a measurement, and I've got this lined up parallel to this door, and I've got 1 3/4 inches from where it's sitting to the door. So in order to be able to slide this in all the way to the door, I need to take 1 3/4 off of here and 1 3/4 off of here. And then when I notch these out, we should be able to slide that in and get it to our 1/8 inch gap from the actual door threshold. Okay, so we got this first board cut, got it notched to fit in that door, and I had to make actually a couple of notch cuts just because of the way that the framing and the door jamb and everything works under there. So, and incidentally, my preferred way to notch pieces like this is to do it on the table saw. So that's how I cut that. But you can see now that slides under, and like we talked about before, it's going to go up. We can have a nice small gap right along the threshold of the door, tucks underneath the door jamb and the door casing, and then we've got a little gap over here along the baseboard that quarter round will cover up. So that's a nice finished look. Now we just need to start banging in boards. Okay, so I'm going to assume, since you're watching this video, that you probably have not installed laminate before. Just kind of go over the basics. Basically, on laminate flooring, you've got kind of a locking mechanism, and they might be slightly different, but they're all basically the same. So you've got on this side what they consider to be the female end, and then over here the male end, and basically they're designed in a way that you want to have the female end facing you as you're installing, and then basically the next board just comes together and it clicks, and they basically click together. And just from using different flooring products, some clip together, I don't know, easier than others. And then on the ends, they have the same process. So once you lay the boards down, you actually just smack straight down on those. And there's a little kind of a plastic retainer in there that holds the ends of the planks together. So there are a couple ways, couple basic tools. So you definitely need to have just a rubber mallet like this, nothing special. And then I highly recommend getting a tapping block. This is just a plastic tapping block. The alternative is that you can actually use a scrap piece of the material that you're actually installing, but I'll kind of show you how this works and why a tapping block works so well. So one thing too, you need to make sure that you're clean of any debris when you're cutting and everything. Sometimes you get little pieces, a little shrapnel, a little trash. that likes to find its way into the grooves, and if you have anything in the grooves, that's gonna impede the installation. So you have to make sure that everything's clean. And all you need to do is take your second board to the first board. You kind of hold it on an angle, go in at, oh, I don't know, something a little bit less than a 45-degree angle, probably like a 25-degree angle or so. So this is where you want to take your tapping block, put it up against the edge. You don't want to put it up against this, you know, the bottom edge, the softer, the MDF stuff. You actually want to put it against the top edge, the finished edge, because that's more durable. And hold it up at a slight angle and just tap it in. And tap back and forth, and that tapping motion just sort of sets that locking mechanism together, and you have a perfect, nice tight fit. And we have to make sure that as we're going, to make sure that on this side over here, you know, we're maintaining a gap over here that your quarter round is going to cover, and then we're just going to work our way down, and we're going to fill in this floor section. Make sure everything's clean. You'll regret it. You'll fight it. So we're ready to put our last panel in, our last plank. But before we do so, we want to make sure that we are ready for our carpet transition, for our carpet reducer. And basically the way this works is you can see that this goes over the top of the laminate like this, lays flush, and then this part actually goes down to the floor. It actually goes into a track. I'll show you how that goes together. But we want to make sure that we have a nice smooth edge here for the reducer to go up against. And we're fine on this side, but this side over here on our final plank, we're going to go ahead and we're going to rip off this edge here, this, you know, what they call the female edge of that locking mechanism. So I'm going to take it to the table saw, and I'm just going to rip it flush with the finished surface here, so we have a nice flat ledge for the edge for that reducer to go up against. Okay, just like that. So I've gone ahead and I've ripped that extra piece off there, so now we have a nice flush edge, and we can go ahead and install this last piece. There we go. Now next step is going to be our transition strips. So at this point in the project, we're ready to install our transition strip. You're always going to need a transition strip with laminate. So you need to you need to cover up that unfinished edge. In this case, as I said before, we're going to carpet, so we're using a carpet reducer, which basically just, I showed you this before, but the laminate will fit up underneath this lip, and then this part actually goes down to the floor. The way this is installed, it comes with a metal track, and this metal track gets screwed to the floor, and then the carpet reducer with that little groove there actually gets pressed in there, and then once that's pressed into that notch, that'll stay firmly in place and won't go anywhere. So I already cut these two pieces just so you can see kind of what to expect. I usually use a Dremel with an abrasive cutoff wheel to cut this metal track. I've actually seen them before where they're kind of scored, so you can just bend them and snap them off at varying different lengths. You could use a hacksaw, but Dremel works pretty quick. And then you are going to need a miter saw to cut your 45-degree or whatever degree angle that you've got for your finished edge. So I've gone ahead and cut this. So I'm gonna go and install my track to the floor. And what I'm gonna do, I'm not gonna butt it up tight to the laminate. I'm actually gonna hold it off just a little bit. I'll hold it pretty close. I'll probably hold it off maybe about 1/8 of an inch or so. And then I'm gonna put screws, on that piece there, I'll probably put 4 screws in. It doesn't take a lot. Just enough to hold it in place. And I'll do that now. Okay, so we've got our track secured. Now before I go ahead and press this in, what I'm doing, I'm just sort of holding it into place. I can feel that it's in the notch of that metal strip. And before I actually clip it in, I'm gonna go ahead and get this side cut. So what I'll do is just hold this piece up so you can see here. I'm gonna hold this next strip up where it's gonna go. So there, I'm tight to the floor. I'm gonna back it off just a little bit. And then I'll make a mark in the corner. Now, right now I'm making a mark to match up with the cut that I already made here. And one just little, I guess, kind of quick tip. When I make a mark like that, I always just kind of I go out past where my cut's gonna be and I just make a quick little line like that. Just as a double check to make sure that I remember when I get to the miter saw that I'm cutting on this angle and not this angle, because sometimes when you're going from one side of the room to the other or whatever, you'll forget and you'll make a cut in the wrong direction. Trust me, I've done it before. So I'll go ahead and make a cut on this and we'll get this one ready to go in. And then the only other step is to cut our metal track. This doesn't have to be super precise. You don't want it to go past the edge of the laminate, so I'm just going to come back, from the edge of the laminate. I'm probably going to come back just like a 1/4 inch or so, and then I'll make a mark on there. So now I can go ahead and throw a few screws in there and secure that to the floor. I like to put one on each end and then I come back and put a couple in the middle. Okay. Now it's the moment of truth. Go ahead and lay that in that groove. Kind of you can feel it in the groove down below. Take our other piece that we cut and I'll do the same thing there. Kind of feel that in the groove. And the key here is we just want to make sure that we get that outside miter joint lined up correctly. Double check, make sure everything fits well. Okay, I'm back. Sorry, I had to take a quick phone call. But we are, as I was saying before, we're going to go ahead and line up each piece so that the miters line up. I'm going to set it down in the track. Make sure that everything's going to fit right so I can feel that I'm in the track there. I can feel that I'm in the track there. My miters look good. Now, if I had here, rather than using my hand to beat on these, I'll use a rubber mallet. And there you go, finished product. So now that carpet reducer will give a nice finished edge. So when the carpet installer comes, he'll put his tack strip here. He'll wrap that carpet around. It'll go right up to that. It'll basically be a nice finished look there. So The only thing that is left to do now in this little entryway is to take cord around, and I actually don't have any. I need to pick some up, so unfortunately I can't finish that for you, but that's kind of a different topic, different video anyway. So we'll just cut some cord around for this wall, that little bit to that to the casing there, and there's a little bitty tiny piece there in that casing. And actually that, rather than cord around, what I'll probably do, because it's such a small gap, is I'll probably, when I caulk this gap of the door here, I'll put a little caulk in there too, rather than messing with trim. So that will finish it off. Well, there you go, guys. That's the basic process for installing laminate flooring. And as you can see, the process is not that difficult. You know, you just need to make sure that you take your time with your cuts. This is a very basic installation here. If you're thinking about doing a larger project, I recommend that you watch some of my other videos, especially the one where I talk about when you get into situations where you need to go underneath door jambs to have a nice clean finished look, and also when you get up against obstacles like kitchen cabinets or walls and things like that. I give you some tips on how to deal with that so you can have a good, clean, finished installation. So I hope that video was helpful for you. Hit the subscribe button if you're interested in seeing more DIY home improvement projects, and I'll keep them coming. Thanks, guys. Take care.